Hello and welcome to our TISOH Hospitality Fall Speaker Series. For those who don't know me, my name is Anthony Lai, Student Affairs Program Manager here at TISOH. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar titled Trust Your Gut, Assertiveness in the Workplace. Well, what does it mean being assertive? As defined in the dictionary, assertiveness is someone whose behavior appears to be confident without being aggressive. Some people seem to be born with it, and if you aren't, today you will learn how to incorporate assertiveness to your professional or personal life. Our guest presenter today is HR consultant Nelandra Anselmo, MFT, SPHR, SHRM, SVP, CHE. Nelandra will provide tips to help you make decisions and advocate for your ideas in the workplace, so you can manage difficult situations without appearing aggressive or rude. You'll also learn to communicate assertively to increase your confidence through professional presence and get the most of what you want out of life and work. If you have any questions during tonight's webinar, please use our Q&A or chat feature and submit your questions. We'll get them answered throughout the presentation. And also, if you're experiencing any difficulties, please submit your query on the chat feature. So Nelandra, I'm going to hand over the speaker to you. If you don't mind sharing us a little bit about yourself and your professional background.
Wonderful. So thanks, Anthony. I'm so glad to be here talking about assertiveness. There are lots of different topics that we're going to cover today. Hopefully they'll be helpful for you, not only at work, but also in your personal life. That's one of the things I love about discussing this topic is it can help you all the way around. So I am an HR consultant, as Anthony said, and I also run a private practice. I'm a therapist, a licensed therapist. So when people say, my therapist told me I need to be more assertive, that was me. So again, I am hopefully going to combine the background and experience I have in human resources and dealing with situations in the workplace, as well as those interpersonal, delicate interpersonal situations that we find ourselves in sometimes. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I like to have an interactive discussion. So if you are okay with, asking questions during our presentation, then please by all means go ahead and do that. But I've also built in some time at the end to be able to do a nice Q&A. I just want to make sure that we are getting up on our screen here. So when we talk about assertiveness, in the workplace, it can be really, really tricky. Whether it is, giving your opinion about a certain decision that's made at work, or asking your boss for a raise, or saying no to an extra assignment or some extra work, it is going to sometimes be tricky, and we'll talk about why. I am having right now a hard time sharing my screen, and so that's why we don't have anything up yet. I'm going to see if I can do this really quick. Well, here's a nice time for you to ask any questions. If you have right now any questions about anything, we could certainly take those. I do apologize for the delay in getting this up. Anthony said that he'll moderate. He'll moderate our Q&A. I'm sorry, you guys. I really want. Oh, here we go. Okay. Let's see if this will work now. We might have to do this with no PowerPoint. Either that, Anthony, or I'm going to email you my PowerPoint really quick, and if you can maybe share it on yours. For whatever reason, we're not. Absolutely. Yeah, for whatever reason, it's not coming up. So Everyone bear with us. I am so sorry. It was just up 1 second ago, and now all of a sudden it is just not. So let me do this for you real quick. I do apologize. Let's see what we have here. It's an awkward silence. I'm so sorry. So here, let me do this. While I'm getting that up, I'm going to ask you a few questions. So I'm going to have you, we're going to do just a little pre-test here, and you're going to rate yourself. You don't have to share the responses with us, but just go ahead and rate yourself. You're going to give yourself a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or a so-so on these. So the first question is, and again, this is just kind of a pre-test, a self-assessment. How good are you at making requests or asking for what you want? So go ahead and rate yourself on that. And again, thumbs up, thumbs down, or so-so. The next one, how good are you with dealing with those in authority? Dealing with authority. Next question will be, how good are you at standing up for what you think is right? You're going to assess yourself on this one. How good are you at saying no when it's appropriate? How good are you at offering criticism to others? And then how good are you at receiving compliments? So we might not think of these things as being associated with assertiveness, but they actually are. They're associated with assertiveness and self-esteem and also healthy boundaries. And so these are the things that we will talk about today. Look, we have some slides. I love it. Although we could have done it without it, we love slides. So you can go ahead and advance them if you can. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you to work like this, but this is what we got to do. This is what we got to do. So it can be tricky to do these things at work. And for a lot of reasons, the stakes can be really high at work. And so it'd be easy for me to sit here and say, go out, be assertive, get what you want, get your needs met. But when you show up at work to do that, there are lots of things that can get in our way. We'll go ahead and advance the slide there. First thing that can get in our way is power differentials. You can all you want advocate for yourself with your boss, but at the end of the day, your boss has the final decision-making authority and power, and you may not end up getting exactly what you want or what you feel you need. So that's what makes it kind of tricky. Also, at the end of the day, we're talking about potentially your livelihood. And so we have to monitor what those relationships at work look like, not just with your boss, but also with your coworkers, with your guests. I could say, well, go out and be assertive. And if you try that out in the line at the grocery store, that's fine. You may not ever see that person at the grocery store again. But people at work, you have to maintain relationships with. And sometimes those can be really, really fragile. And so we want to make sure that in the context of work, we are using not just the skill of assertiveness, but the tool of assertiveness effectively. So assertiveness is a skill, but it's also a tool that you have to know how to use in the proper situation. So just like you wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a screw, because that's not the appropriate tool, you may have to pick and choose when it's appropriate to use assertiveness. And here's another thing. Sometimes it might be the right tool at the right time. So for example, you might get your screwdriver and say, I've got this. I'm going to go ahead and screw this in. But still, at times you may opt to use your fingers to screw something in because of the fact that you've decided that it would be more appropriate to do so. So relationships are fragile, and that's why it can be tricky to use assertiveness at work. The other might be cultural limitations. And when I talk about cultural limitations, I mean your work culture. There are some work environments that don't necessarily encourage or support direct and honest communication. And so in that regard, It could be that there's a misalignment with your personal values, with your needs, and what your organization can provide to you. And that certainly can end up being a really difficult situation. I mean, we're talking about life decisions here, folks. So hold on to your hat. These are the things we're going to talk about. We'll go ahead and advance the slide now. So what is this thing that we call assertiveness? I generally describe it in just a few bullet points here and a couple of sentences. Assertiveness is recognizing and understanding how you feel about things, your emotions, and then identifying what your needs are in a specific situation, and not just your needs, but what you have a right to expect for yourself. So identifying your needs and rights, and then making requests of other people. And in making those requests, you're influencing their behavior change in order to get your needs met. And then you have to have a willingness to follow through. And when I say a willingness to follow through, this is where you say to a person, you know, this is what I am going to need. I'm going to make this request for your behavior change or for you to do something different in the future. You get to decide whether you want to do that or not. But at the end of the day, what I am prepared to do, I'm going to tell you what I'm prepared to do if you're not able to meet that request. And so sometimes you take it even that far. And that sounds like it's pretty bold, right? It sounds almost like an ultimatum. It sounds almost like you are demanding things. And this is where I think a lot of times we get afraid to be assertive, is because we have this idea that assertiveness equals aggression, or it equals, being pushy or demanding. But really, assertiveness is something very different from that. Assertiveness is getting your needs met, making requests for behavior change without taking anything away from the other person. We're talking about preserving relationships, not damaging the quality of the relationship at all. So at work, we know what can stop us, but what stops us even in our personal lives? When we have a hard time being assertive, there could be a handful of things going on. We're sometimes hesitant to engage in this process of assertive communication, and for a lot of different reasons. One may be that we have a skills deficit. We said assertiveness is a skill. It's something that you can learn, and some of us are learning it now as adults, and others of us learned it when we were very young. If you learned it when you were very young, that means you probably were raised in a family of origin, or you have a background where those skills were taught to you very early. Depending on your background and upbringing and your experiences, you may not have been exposed to good role models for assertiveness. You may not have been told the value or the importance of the use of an assertiveness skill. So it could be that we don't have the skills fully developed. It could be cultural influences, and we'll go back to our history, our background, our family of origin. You know, in some cultures, we may be taught norms and ways of behaving that may go against what we feel what we consider assertiveness or assertive behavior. And then there are those self-defeating beliefs. Uh, there are two sides of our brain. There's the logical side of our brain, and then there is the emotional, mostly irrational side of our brain. And depending on the day and depending on the situation, one of these is going to win out over the other. One's going to take the lead. And so when our logical side of our brain isn't necessarily the one that's in the lead, what we get is limiting beliefs about what we are entitled to, what we deserve, what we are good enough to have or to ask for, what we should do. And that can go back to those cultural influences as well, what we should do. And those cultural influences don't necessarily have to be from our ethnic culture. It could or religious culture. It could certainly be our American culture, where we have norms regarding age, and we have gender norms. And so we have to put all of that into context when we're talking about assertiveness in the workplace, and understand that sometimes those cultural norms don't always serve us well to bring them into the workplace. The next one I have here is anxiety. You know, if you are plagued with anxiety, that means worry and fear are pretty close friends of yours. And if you are constantly worried and constantly fearful of things, then it's going to be hard a lot of times for you to recognize your needs and your feelings, make requests to get those needs met. Um, and more people than we realize actually suffer from some form of anxiety. And this can be a problem if one of the main ingredients of assertiveness is self-awareness, those self-defeating beliefs, and that anxiety equals this phrase, I shouldn't. And so when we get to those shoulds, that's when we certainly can run into problems. And the last one there I have is personality. If you don't have a struggle with anxiety or worry or any of those mental health things that we talk about, certainly personality everyone can understand, and everyone has to come to terms with at some point. But depending on your style and your personality, you may be more of a direct communicator or more of an indirect communicator, which is going to affect your ability to be assertive. You may be more task focused versus people focused. And if you're task focused, this idea of recognizing my feelings and communicating and sharing those with other people, that's going to be foreign to you. And so we have to understand that. You may be more guarded versus more open. Also going to be hard to practice assertiveness. And also this may affect whether or not you come across as too passive or too aggressive versus assertive. So let's go ahead and take a look at our next slide. And this is where we really look at the idea of this continuum. So like I said before, sometimes assertiveness is confused as aggressiveness, as being aggressive, but that actually isn't the case. Assertiveness is something that is very healthy, and it falls somewhere in between being too aggressive and actually too passive. So let's take a look at what it is like to be too passive or too aggressive. Oh, and then my favorite, when you combine the two, you get passive aggressive. We're going to talk about that too. And then where assertiveness falls in there. So when we're talking about communicating, there are different styles. We'll go ahead and take a look at passive first. When you are using a passive communication style, basically what you're saying is you are either giving up your rights or not seeking to get your own needs met because you're not expressing your feelings, you're not expressing your thoughts, and you're not expressing your beliefs. If you are a person who tends to fall on this side of the continuum, and remember, this is a continuum, it's a spectrum. So a lot of times it's not either or. I'm not labeling a person as passive, aggressive. Generally, we're going to fall somewhere. We're all going to fall somewhere on this continuum. So let's not think of it as either or, but rather less or more. And then you can ask yourself where you fall here. So the primary goal of someone who prefers or has a tendency toward a passive communication style really is that they either want to just please other people or they altogether want to avoid the possibility of there being any kind of conflict. And when I say conflict, I mean someone just disagreeing, not sharing your beliefs or views or opinions or perspectives, or someone just responding back to you in a way that makes you uncomfortable. For some people, especially those who live kind of over here on the passive side of things, that feels like that can feel like major conflict or even rejection. So I'm going to give you an example as we go through our next slides here. So at my office, one office that I used to work at, we had a covered parking space, and we actually paid to reserve a covered parking space. So I found that I would go into work, and it was in an office building where there were medical offices, and so they opened pretty early in the morning. At my office, I kind of start later in the day because people like to come after work and that sort of thing. So I would come into the office, later in the morning or in the midday, and I would see that someone was parked in my paid assigned parking spot. And so I actually had an opportunity to see the person who had been parking in my spot. And it wasn't just one time, it kind of happened a few times. And so I actually had an opportunity to see the person. Now, if I were a person who tended to be on the passive side of things of communication, you can imagine what I would have done. Probably nothing. I probably would have done nothing, or maybe I would have said, they probably need the parking spot, or it doesn't happen that often, so I'm just gonna not say anything. Um, so that would be an example of a passive style. When we go all the way to the other side to the aggressive style, you can imagine what I would have done when I saw the person parking in my parking spot. So you can imagine that, sure, I'm going to stand up for my rights, get my needs met, express my feelings, but I'm going to do it in a way that violates someone else's rights. I'm going to do it in a way that may even cause harm to the other person. So can you imagine me pulling up, seeing that person who is taking my spot and going in the back of my car and grabbing a baseball bat and just running up to their car and smashing the windshields and saying, how dare you park in my spot? Now, will they probably never park in my spot again? They probably won't ever park in my spot again. But what have I done? Again, these are people who I have to see every day. I don't want to cause damage to anyone, but that's the aggressive style. Let's move on to one of my favorites, the passive aggressive style of communication. Now, you are probably asking, well, how can it be two different extremes at once? Well, first of all, I'll say in mental health, we don't necessarily like extremes. We don't necessarily think that they are healthy. So if anyone is too far on the passive side or too far on the aggressive side, then it probably isn't going to be working for everyone. But how can you be two extremes at once? Well, this is where you are not directly expressing your feelings or thoughts or beliefs. So you're not actively looking to get your needs met. And at the same time, you're still letting another person know that what they're doing you don't like. And you are putting pressure on them to um, to maybe feel a certain way. So this idea of being passive aggressive, okay, think of it like this. Let's say I pull up to the person who is parking in my spot, or let's say I don't see them and I get out of my car and I sprinkle tax on the in the parking space so that when they go to leave or when they show up, they run over tax. So I didn't directly address them, but I let them know how I was feeling about things. Same thing, if I were to go into the office and just, complain to everyone in my office about how this person is parking in my spot and I don't know why. And maybe somebody will say something or maybe somebody else will do something. That could be considered passive aggressive because I'm not directly seeking to get my needs met, but I am letting a person know that I'm unhappy. Uh, Another one might be to use sarcasm, or maybe I would approach the person and instead of directly expressing my feelings, I might say something like, "Oh, I see that you are parking in a covered spot. That must be nice, especially since it's been raining the last couple of days. Nice to have covered parking, isn't it?" So sure, maybe I am addressing the person, but I'm doing it in a way that, and look at the goal here, so that I can safely make my feelings known without having to take responsibility for my own feelings. And this is what happens when someone has this style of passive aggressive. I'm spending a lot of time on this because sometimes it's hard to get it right and get in the middle. Um, but when someone is using that style, they generally give themselves an opportunity if they are directly addressed. Oh, well, what do you mean? Do you have something to say to me? They give themselves an opportunity to back out and say, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean? I just said it was raining. I just said it must be nice, right? So I never have to actually fully own my feelings. Okay, so now we move on to assertiveness. And this is right in the middle. It's a healthy combination of getting my needs met, but without violating anybody else's rights or harming anyone else. And so my goal here is to address that person and say, you know, I don't want to take anything away from you. And at the same time, I need to make sure that my needs are met. So I'm not going to allow you to take anything away from me. This is an art. Assertiveness, I've already said, is a skill, it's a tool, and it's also an art form because of the fact that you use your words, you use your demeanor, you use your presence, you use your ability to connect with other people to make requests and influence behavior change. So I might say something like, I might approach that person who's parking in my parking spot and say, you know, hello, I noticed that you're parking here in my spot. I'm very clear. I'm saying, I noticed that you're parking here in the spot that's assigned to me. When I drive up and I see that you're parking in the spot, it confuses me, first of all, because I was told that this was my spot. I actually pay for the spot. It also can be frustrating for me because when I get here, a lot of times I am on a time schedule and I have to then search for somewhere else to park. And so it's a bit frustrating. So what I'm asking is that in the future that you please not park in my spot. And I'm sure that you can find one of the other uncovered free spots that are available here in the lot, right? So I don't want to take anything away. My goal is equality. Everyone's needs are valued. I am just asserting my needs in this situation because of the fact that I have a right to do so. I'm paying for the spot. It actually does belong to me. And so in that regard, that's actually what happened. And that person actually did stop parking in my spot. But in that way, we're using our assertiveness skills to get our needs met without damaging a relationship. This is a time that I would call for questions or comments. So if I think we see one down here, so I think, Anthony, I'm sorry I got you doing slides and Q&A. I apologize. But I think we have one
No
here.
worries. I think we actually have an earlier question from Mandy. So from hello, Nelandra, what's the trick in finding the balance between aggressive and flippant?
Aggressive and, did we say flippant?
Yes.
Yeah,
Flippant.
so we don't want to be aggressive or flippant. So I think that was probably before we put up our continuum. Really, we're finding a balance between too aggressive and too passive. And so that definitely is our assertiveness. Sorry, I didn't get to that earlier. So we're going to go ahead and change the
Oh, we also
slide.
have another question, Nelandra, from
Okay,
Casey from our Q&A feature.
great.
Nelandra asks, as a direct task-focused, non-emotional, non-open person, what are your recommendations for being tactful in using assertiveness?
So the recommendation really is to use exactly that formula that I just used when we gave the example of the parking spot. When I'm in my office working with clients, we call them I statements. And usually we say, when you, I feel, I need. So when you do this or when X happens, when you do X or when X happens, that's the first part. So we state the situation. I notice that you're parking in my spot. I feel, and then we talk about the effect that it has on us. If it's hard for you to access your feelings, that's okay. You can say, you know, it's raining outside and my car is getting wet and yours is dry, you know, so still just sticking with the facts. But this is the effect that it's having on me if it's hard for you to access those feelings. And then the last one, I need. This is where you make the request. You say, what I'll need from you in the future, what I'm requesting of you in the future is that you not park in my spot, that you please not park in my spot. And so when I feel, I need, you don't have to, like I said, be able to understand your own feelings in the moment or someone else's. If you just use the formula, that will most likely get you to where you want to be. Thanks for that question. Any others, Anthony, or are we going to move on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so our next slide, we're going to talk about one of the foundations of assertiveness. Our first foundation, part of our foundation is self-awareness. The next one is boundaries. So I define boundaries as your personal rules and limits that communicate to others how they should treat you. Your boundaries are so important because they let other people know what's acceptable to you and what's unacceptable, what you'll allow and what you won't allow, what you'll say yes to and what you'll say no to. And the key to having good boundaries is being consistent, is being consistent. So there are different kinds of boundaries here. So think about this. There are physical, mental, and emotional boundaries. Physical boundaries pertain to your personal space. Maybe you or maybe someone you know isn't a hugger, for example. And when people come in for a hug, it feels like their boundaries are being violated. So this is where I draw the line. I don't like hugging. This is what, remember, acceptable to me, unacceptable. What I'll allow and what I won't allow. What I say yes to and what I say no to. A strong physical boundary for me is I'm not a hugger. Or some people don't like it when, different parts of their body are touched or when their privacy is violated. Even a door can be a physical boundary. So if I close my door, that's a boundary saying maybe I don't want to be disturbed. And this is a boundary that I'm not willing to compromise. The next is mental boundaries. And these are kind of your thoughts, your opinions, your values, your beliefs, and whether or not you will stick with them. Are you easily swayed? Is it easy for people to cross your boundaries and make you do something or say something or try and feel something that actually you initially said was a different case? And so are you firm in your beliefs? Are you easily suggestible? So if you have firm beliefs that you won't compromise, then you probably have good mental boundaries. And then, of course, there are emotional boundaries. This sometimes is the most difficult type of boundary to manage and to understand. So when we have poor emotional boundaries, then really what we're saying is it's hard for me to determine where another person ends and I begin. Um, it is almost as though you don't feel like you have the right or the ability to have separate feelings or emotions. So if this other person feels happy, then I'm happy. If you want to know how I'm feeling, I'm going to look at them and say, how are we feeling? It's the we instead of I am my own separate person. So we might hear terms like enmeshment or codependency. Those kind of terms is when we have poor boundaries and it's almost as though I don't have this ability to separate myself from another person. Now, this one you have to be really careful with because when this happens, a lot of times it leaves you very susceptible to feelings of guilt and to be manipulated emotionally. When people do things, usually the people who follow the passive aggressive type of indirect communication, when they do things to hopefully cause you to feel a certain way, none of this is healthy. None of it is healthy. So I like to think of boundaries. I give the analogy of a fence. So you have your yard and another person has their yard. And all you have to worry about is your side of the fence, your yard. You're going to tend to your garden and mow your lawn and make sure everything is in order on your side of the fence. And you're going to go all the way up to that fence. But what you're not going to do is go on to the other person's side and try to mow their lawn or try to tend to their garden because that belongs to them. They're responsible for their yard. You're responsible for your yard. And you also don't want it to go the other way. You don't want them, coming into your yard and trying to replant your flowers or move around your lawn chairs or mow your lawn shorter than you wanted it, right? Everybody just takes care of their own yard. And you can go right up to that fence and say, here's what I'm willing to do. Here's what I'm not willing to do, but this is as far as I go. Here's where the fence is. Those are boundaries, and they're so important when we talk about assertiveness. So what happens when your boundaries are weak? Let's go ahead and click the slide. One more time. Yes, very good. So when our boundaries are weak, you feel it. And this is where we talk about this part of trusting your gut. When your boundaries are weak, you feel it. It's when you feel yourself saying yes when you really mean no. It's when you feel uncomfortable physically because someone has, done something that violated your physical boundaries. They've invaded your personal space. It's when you feel very emotionally reactive to something someone has done, but you don't quite know why, but you know that you're uncomfortable and you're feeling emotions that maybe you can't control. It's this cognitive dissonance. This is where there's something that just isn't quite right. It's off and you can't figure out what it is, but it's just not lining up. It's misaligned. And then, like we talked about, those excessive feelings of guilt. When your boundaries are weak and you allow other people to cross your boundaries, these are the things that you come across. And so when we talk about, we're going to go ahead and advance, when we're talking about trust your gut, what we're talking about then is this idea of if something feels like it's wrong for you, and we'll forward the slide. Yeah. When something feels like it's wrong for you, it probably is wrong for you. So listen to that. Listen to, and we say trust your gut, and there's a reason we say that. Scientists have for a while identified the fact that our guts, like, our digestive systems and our stomach, really do have the same kind of neurons and neurotransmitters that our brains have. And they sometimes call it our second brain. Like we get that signal in our gut when we're eating that we're full, and it sends a signal straight to our brains to say, okay, brain, stop eating now. Tell the body to stop eating. So there really is a direct line from our gut to our brains. And so listen to that. And when you feel something is off, then you can start to do things like becoming curious. If you can just ask questions and say, I am curious as to why you would say that, or to why you would make that assumption. This is you, kind of your antenna going up and saying, hang on a second, something may not be right here, and it may not be in alignment with my personal values or beliefs or my boundaries or my needs or my rights. My rights may be violated here. And so listen, become curious, start to ask lots of questions. Confusion is neutral. And I use that term a lot. I say, okay, I'm just a little confused here. So I'm expressing my feelings, but I'm doing it in a way that is very neutral. It opens up a dialogue. Pay attention to those changes in your mood. Pay attention to those physical changes. Question your limiting beliefs. Remember the logical and irrational emotional side of your brain. Ask yourself, what side of the brain is driving here? Because it's easy to identify irrational thoughts and beliefs about yourself, and then to quickly question those and replace them. I call it your second voice. And I call it your second voice because, we identify a negative, irrational belief. Oh, I'm not worth it. Or maybe I'm not good enough. Or why bother? Nobody likes me anyway, or whatever it is. And I quickly jump into that second voice. And I call it the second voice because it goes, wait a second. Let's examine the evidence here. Let's look at the history and the past of what has happened. Let's look at, all of the accomplishments I have. So whatever it is, you want to question those limiting beliefs. And so again, it's this getting into this practice of feeling what's right for you and accepting that and being okay to accept that. Quieting your mind. So if you engage in any type of mindfulness, meditation, anything that's going to quiet your mind and your body, do that, and your environment. And when I say your environment, not only making a peaceful environment, but you may need to limit your exposure to some people. You may need to limit your exposure to people who are feeding that negative, irrational self-talk. So these are things that you do for yourself. So I'm going to put up some do's and do not do's here. The first do that we're going to look at is acknowledge that people are responsible for their own feelings and their own behaviors. Remember the fence. Their yard, their responsibility. Your yard is your responsibility. Value your needs and your rights, and give them as much value as you would give other people. So think about the person that you hold in high regard or high esteem. If you believe that they would have that they would have a right to or an entitlement to a certain thing, then you place your needs and your values right up there, expressing your emotions and your preferences and your priorities. And this is where your language comes in, your preferences. I would prefer, I can live with either one, but my preference would be, or I would prefer to do it this way. Talk about your priorities. I would love to do that. I would love to be able to do that. I have a lot of competing priorities right now, and this one really has to be at the top for me. So again, you are expressing your feelings, you're expressing your needs, and you're doing it in a way that doesn't take away from anyone else. Everyone knows a person who has really great assertiveness skills. I can almost guarantee you, everybody knows a person who is assertive. This is a person who freely expresses their opinions and their beliefs. This is a person who directly communicates, makes requests of other people, and they do it in a way that's just matter of fact. They do it in a way that's very natural. And for these people, folks love them. Folks like them. And you're thinking, how is it that a person can, say their feelings directly, make requests, ask people to change their behaviors, do it in a way that's so very matter of fact, and also have the respect and admiration of other people? This is assertiveness. And so when you do that, you have to remember to choose your responses carefully, especially when emotions are high. This is where emotional intelligence comes into play. That's a whole other topic, a whole other talk. Rehearse what you're going to say. Using positive body language. So constantly making eye contact, smiling. I do a little head nod. Even when I'm asking someone, even when I'm asserting my opinion and asking for something, I'm doing a little head nod. I'm making eye contact, addressing issues directly and speaking in the first person. Remember your I statements. I'm talking about how I'm feeling. I'm talking about the result of, these actions and behaviors. This is how it's making me feel. So I'm using the first person. I'm speaking in I. And so it's different from saying, sometimes I talk to people and they say things like, it can really just make you upset when people do that. It just makes you worry and it makes you fearful. And they're saying you in this general sense when they really mean themselves. And it would serve them best to just speak in the first person and say, this is how it's making me feel. So let's go ahead and look at our do not do's. Don't deny ownership of your feelings or apply these labels or overgeneralize. It's a little, let's see, oh, the temperature is really low in here. And I don't know, some other people might feel like it's too cold. So anything that would cause a person to say to you, is that you? Are you cold? Do you want me to turn the AC down a little bit? Anything that would make someone question or wonder whether or not you're talking about yourself. These are situations where you could probably use your assertiveness skills a little bit better. Don't use sarcasm. Oh, yeah, that's going to work. For sure, that'll work, right? Because remember what that one is called, passive aggressive. So that's where I'm not going to directly say how I feel, but I'm going to make sure you know that I don't like it. It's not productive. It can be very annoying, actually, and it certainly isn't healthy. So don't minimize issues. Oh, it's not a deal. Don't bother, just forget about it. Whatever you want is fine. Or just agree unwillingly. We don't have to do that. Now, of course, you're going to choose your battles. Again, we're talking about the workplace. And sometimes in the workplace, it can be tricky. You may have to agree. You may have to compromise. You may have to play a little give and take. But again, understanding the skill of assertiveness is the most important, and using it correctly is going to be up to you for your context. Don't hand over your power. So I hear people sometimes say, oh, she made me so angry. She made me so upset. And we've heard this before. You get to choose how you respond to something. Why are we putting the blame and the responsibility for your feelings on someone else? So own your feelings. Don't hand over that power to someone else. And as a side note, the idea of someone making you angry, it's very easy to get angry. I call anger like low-hanging fruit. You know, it's easy to just get angry and declare that I'm angry. It's easy to say I'm angry. But usually I'm angry because I'm something else. It's like the iceberg model. Anger is just on the tip. That's just what you see. Usually if I'm angry and I'm saying I'm angry, it's because I'm something else. I'm angry because I'm disappointed. I'm angry because I am fearful or worried. I'm angry because I'm embarrassed, right? So a lot of times I'm angry because I'm something else. So let's go ahead and change our slide. So again, when you're trusting your gut, what you're going to make sure that you do, and we're kind of wrapping up here before we get to our Q&A, we want to leave some time for just a little practice, and then we'll jump into a Q&A. So know your worth. And when I say know your worth, I mean, we've talked about self-esteem, and we've talked about, you know, placing value on your needs and your abilities. You know, it may be helpful when we say know your worth to actually list your strengths, list your accomplishments, put an actual dollar amount on your time and your energy. We know they're valuable, but really, how valuable are they? So, you know, again, it's very easy for you to listen to that emotional, irrational side of your brain, those shoulds and ought tos, and that negative self-talk, and devalue yourself. So know what you are worth. Practice advocating for yourself. Many of us are in helping professions, or we're in professions where we serve others all the time. And so the same kind of care that you put into caring for others, do that for yourself. If you had a client or someone that you looked after at work that seemed to be treated in a way that wasn't fair, you would certainly speak up for that person and say something. And so do that for yourself as well. Practice that. And then the last one is being consistent and persistent. So here's the thing. If you set out to use your assertiveness, especially if you're doing that from a place on that continuum that is closer to being passive, you're going to have some difficulty in a couple of areas. First of all, it's going to feel unnatural to you. Secondly, when we go from being too passive to trying to be assertive, sometimes it's like a pendulum swing. Sometimes we overshoot assertiveness and we get too aggressive. And, you know, we say something because we think we're asserting ourselves. And then if people start to look at you, go, whoa, what was that? If that happens, then really what that means is we probably overshot it. And that's okay. It just takes practice. The other thing, yeah, and don't give up. The other thing is, if people are used to you being passive, or communicating in a style that is passive, you're going to potentially ruffle their feathers when you start to use your assertiveness skills. And they're going to continue to attempt to push your buttons, or, you know, do things that maybe aren't as healthy for you. They're going to continue to try to do that. So you have to be consistent and persistent and not budge. This is where your boundaries come in. Think of it like a vending machine, right? So people are used to pushing your buttons and getting what they want from you, because of the fact that maybe you were living on a side that was a little more to the passive side. They're used to pushing your buttons. And so what happens when you go to a vending machine, you push the button, or you're expecting something to come out and it doesn't come out? Well, first of all, you just keep pushing the buttons. We have a question, so I'll get that in a second. You keep pushing the buttons. You're like, wait a minute. But then eventually, what do you start doing when you push the button on a vending machine and you don't get what you want? You start kicking that thing and shaking it, and what's going on, and pounding on it. You know, it may feel like that. It may feel like the people who are used to you not being assertive, that they might continue to push buttons and try to rattle things a little bit because you're not giving them the same responses that they're used to. So be careful of that. So I wanted to give us a chance to practice a little bit While we do that, I'm going to go to the Q&A and see what we have.
All right, first question on the Q&A. Do you find yourself changing your tone, pitch of voice when having conversations? Example, higher, softer tone for friendly, requesting, needing something from them conversations, or deeper or stronger tones for negotiation, business, and talking to a boss conversations.
Sure, absolutely. When you're using your assertiveness skills, especially communication, it's like a mixer board, right? You have to turn this up a little, turn that down a little, and sometimes you have to play with it to get it right. So, absolutely. When I am wanting to make a point, sometimes instead of being forceful to make that point, I may even lower my voice a little bit. I may even speak more slowly. This tells someone that this is important. You better lean in and listen to what I have to say. This one's important. So, sure, that's an example of that. But yes, we're going to change not only our tone of voice, our pitch, our volume, our speed, and adjust our body language according to the situation. Thanks for that question. Okay, so let's see what we have. Uh, Here's our post test. The pre-test was kind of those self-assessment questions. Here's our last one. Your coworker, this is a scenario, your coworker constantly interrupts and talks over you in team meetings. What would be an assertive approach to that? I'm going to give you a couple of moments to decide what your assertive approach would be, what you might say. Here's a hint. You might be able to use the I statement. When you, I feel, I need. So let's see if we get any in our chat or even in our Q&A section about how we would handle that. So, okay, so if we don't get anything, then guess what? I will just say it. I'll just say it. I know if you were typing, I know sometimes it takes a while to get in what you're going to type and then get it into it. So I wanted to give enough time for that. So your coworker is constantly interrupting you and talking over you in a team meeting. Let's talk about what you might say. The first one is,
Oh, we got a response.
oh, yeah, see?
From the chat. Sean says, I'm still speaking. I would appreciate if you wait until I finish my thought before you respond.
Okay, very good, very good. I'm still speaking. I would appreciate it. So that's nice. I would appreciate it if you would allow me to finish my thought. That's great. I may even add, when you, and we might not do this in the meeting. This might be something that happens after the meeting where we directly approach someone and say, you know, when you interrupt me during the meetings when we're talking, it makes me feel as though you're devaluing my ideas. And so, what I would request of you is that you please allow me to finish talking before you start to talk in our next meeting. Right? So, perfect. I would appreciate it. I love the word appreciate. I love pointing out the fact that I'm talking. But again, it's hard to not be aggressive on that. It's really hard to not be aggressive. And so we go from you're interrupting me to I feel frustrated or I feel undervalued or I feel, right? So we go from you're doing this to here's how I feel. Here's the effect of your behaviors, the effects of your actions and behaviors. So very good. We passed the post test. We're going to open it up for the few minutes we have left. We're going to go ahead and open it up. We're going to get to our questions, open it up for any other questions. Oh, and I think we have another chat as well.
All right, from the chat. Stop talking and tell the coworker to please stop interrupting till I'm done with my idea. Then he or she can add his or her comments.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And again, it's about the tone, it's about your facial expressions. And so, absolutely. I like that one. I think we might have a question here.
A question from Ruth. If my coworker is talking over me, I would just say, take the stage, LOL, but then it's my turn.
Take the stage. Absolutely. Then it's my turn. Exactly. We said that assertiveness is about equality and mutuality. So if I want to go ahead and concede and allow you to speak first, fine. It will be my turn next, right? So that's where the assertiveness comes in. That's where the boundaries come in. Sure, we both will get a turn. Our opinions and beliefs and thoughts are equally valuable. I have no problem handing the stage over to you and allowing you to go first, and then I will go, right? And then that's our head nod, our smile. I am not looking to damage the quality of our relationship. I'm just looking to get my own needs met. I like that one, Ruth. Thank you. Then we might have something else in the chat too.
It looks like that's about it.
Wonderful. Okay, so advance the slide. I'm going to say again, using assertiveness, again, we said is a skill, it's a tool, and it's also an art form. If we can master the art of assertiveness, we most certainly are going to be able to get our needs met and potentially strengthen our relationships. Not only are we not looking to damage relationships, we're going to strengthen our relationships. And so good luck with your assertiveness. I have contact information. You can always email me or call and ask a question. I am completely open to that. I hope this was helpful for you, and I think I will see you very soon in the future for another webinar. So thanks for joining me today.